Jackson State has seen a lot of transfer portal action in their wide receiver room, both good and bad. But the two biggest moves that they've seen this offseason kind of cancel themselves out in a way. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current site expert at Who Dat Dish and contributing writer at USA Today's Saints. Why are we adding to the intro? But today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. We'll wrap up today's episode with Chennis Berry bringing in another former All-SIAC player, this time from Fort Valley State, not his former university. In segment 2, Arik Gilbert was one of the biggest names in college football as a freshman, and now he's a member of the Savannah State Tigers. But I want to get into Jackson State first because this was actually supposed to be our lead for yesterday's episode. Yesterday's episode was supposed to begin with us talking about the wide receiver room at Jackson State. And then I remembered I had this cool little stat that I wanted to share with you. If you haven't seen it, please go check it out yesterday. I really enjoyed bringing these numbers to you. I thought it was a cool, unique spin on draft covers that we don't typically get to do. So I wanted to do that for you yesterday. But today I'm back at it again with J State. There's been a lot of mobility in the Jackson State wide receiver room, and the two biggest moves revolve around Nathan Rembert and then also Isaiah Spencer. And those aren't the only departures or additions, but those are the two biggest names either coming or leaving Jackson State in this offseason. And I would say the fact that they both happened over the same couple of months or whatever, they kind of cancel each other out. And so, yeah, I feel a little bit less bad if I'm Jackson State about losing Isaiah Spencer because I do have Nathan Rembert. But at the same in the same coin, I kind of feel a little less excited because I'm no longer building on my wide receiver core. I feel like I'm replacing, and that's a completely different feeling because listen, over the last week and a half ish, so I'd probably say since last Monday, you've seen a lot of change. Rico Powers has entered the portal. You're looking at Nathan Rembert, who announced he was going to enter the portal last Monday. And I think that was the confusing part. When it came to Nathan Rembert and going into the portal, it just didn't make any sense. I'm still curious on what it was that made him go into the portal because this isn't just the money's calling. This isn't just I've been here for a while. I built my stock. He just got there. He just got there, went through a spring season, and something he didn't like stuck with him. And maybe it's minor. Maybe it's enough to get through the year. But it's definitely something that gives me a tad bit of pause. The fact that Rembert was so quick to jump back into the portal, and even though he stepped out just as quick, the fact that he was so quick to step into the portal, it just makes me wonder, what could he have possibly seen that made him say, I got to go? We probably won't have, I don't have the answer to that right now. I ain't gonna say we'll never get the answer to it. Hopefully I can. But as it stands right now, I can't answer that question. I'll just pose it and tell you why I think it's a funny situation. It's too quick for me to be okay with him entering the portal. But this isn't the point here. The point is that Nathan Rembert entered the portal and stepped out the portal. But unfortunately, Jackson State retaining the player that they actually just acquired, but never mind. Jackson State retaining Rembert is kind of offset by the fact that they lose Isaiah Spencer. So, yes, once again, I don't feel as bad about losing Spencer because I know I have Rembert. But when I had Rembert, I actually thought we were going to have a phenomenal receiving core with known commodities. You could still have a great receiving core, but it was going to be Rembert, Powers, Spencer, Fortillion. Now I'm looking at Rembert and Fortillion, and I still think that's a really good duo, but it's not what I thought I was getting. So you're not less excited about getting the Mississippi Valley State all SWAC player. You're not less excited about getting that guy. You just understand that if I was starting at a 5, and if I think Nathan Rembert can take me up 3 notches, I just have to understand I'm starting from a lower level now because I don't have all of the talent that I had when we first started having these conversations. And I think that that's the difficult thing when trying to project. And it's also the difficult thing about being happy about this. Often, since I'll say over the last couple of days since I knew I was going to have this conversation, I've gone back and forth on which one holds more weight. What holds more weight, losing Isaiah Spencer or getting Nathan Rembert? And I lean towards Spencer. Let me tell you why. Naturally, I'm a pretty risk averse person. I'll be honest with you. So losing the known commodity hurts a lot because as great as Nathan Rembert was with Mississippi Valley State, an all conference player, first team, all SWAC, he did a lot, but I don't know what he's going to be at Jackson State. And yes, I think great players tend to translate, but if I take a elite deep threat, take an elite deep threat, and I say, okay, we want you to run a lot of curls, we want you to run a lot of in routes, out routes. We're going to really condense your route tree. I can guarantee you that he's going to be less effective in this lesser role because you have to play the guy's strengths. Most players are going to need a system that benefits them. And will Jackson State benefit him? I don't know yet. So because I'm not quite sure on whether or not it's going to work, and this is something I literally can't know until the season begins, but because I don't know for sure, I'm going to lean towards the loss of Spencer holding more weight. I do believe that gaining Rembert offsets it, which is the point of this topic, but it does hold a lot of weight to know that you're losing a guy in Isaiah Spencer who had the most catches, or excuse me, the most receiving yards on your team. He had the most yards per catch, second in yards, or excuse me, second in receptions in general. It's tough. But then Jonas Fortillion, and I like him a lot. I really do. He wasn't far behind Spencer in catches, but he did or excuse me, he wasn't far behind him in yards, but he did have more catches. He had 11 touchdowns. So I think that Fortillion and Rembert can be a really good 1-2 duo. You just wanted a triumvirate, and that's the part that gets you. That's the thing that really stings about losing Spencer is you're over here getting excited saying, okay, cool, I got Fortillion, who's a double-digit touchdown guy. I got Spencer, who's dynamic. He was our leading receiver yardage-wise. And then I'm getting Rembert from Valley, and he's an all-conference first-team player. So now I'm looking at this trio that I have for Jacoby and Morgan to throw to, and I'm going crazy now. And that's not even talking about bringing in guys like Rico Powers, who recently entered the portal as well. So if you're Jackson State, you're feeling like you have this four-man unit to throw the ball to, and it dwindles itself down to a duo. That, to me, does sting, but it's far from insurmountable. Right? Like you look at what you are able to keep and say, oh, yeah, I'll do that any day of the week. Any day of the week, I will take that. Sometimes it's literally just seeing your eyes on something else. You can get a great gift, but because your eye was on this other thing, it doesn't feel that great. We'll see how Jackson State treats it. I do want to say this about Spencer, though. He's seeing a lot of P4 offers. I don't know what made him hop in the portal, but he's seeing a lot of P4 offers. I'm seeing Baylor. I'm seeing Pitt. I'm seeing Wisconsin, Utah, Kentucky. That's what the Big 12, the SEC. Where's Utah at these days? I don't know where Utah is. Are they in the Big 12? I don't know. But Baylor, SEC, or excuse me, Baylor, Big 12, Kentucky, SEC, Wisconsin, Big 10, Pitt, ACC. Yeah, Pitt's in ACC now, right? Have they always been in ACC? I think they are. Yeah, they're in the ACC. Oh, yeah, they've been in ACC since 2011. They feel like they should be a Big 10 school. Just to be clear, like they should be right there with Penn State. But what conference is Utah in? Since we're talking about it, Utah is in the Big 12 now. So, okay, I was accurate. Good job, Darrion. I'm proud of you. Even when you second guess yourself, you should still pat yourself on the back. Well, the point is, Spencer is getting a lot of calls. Spencer is a hot commodity for sure. And of course, you have other schools um offering him, but at the same time, we can only go through that quick little five. But let's push forward. Let's push forward. I would love to know what you think. Which one holds more weight? I think they personally cancel out. They're very even. You get a stud wide receiver, you lose a stud wide receiver. It kind of feels like when Stephon Diggs leaves Minnesota and you get Justin Jefferson. That's what it feels like. And I know that technically that ended up being an upgrade, but at the time, it just felt like, okay, after that rookie year, Diggs is balling in Buffalo. Jefferson was balling as a rookie in Minnesota. We're both good. We win here. That's what it feels like would be the case with Rembert and Spencer. But let's push forward because Arik Gilbert is a name that a lot of you may know. Might have forgot it because it's been a while, but you probably know the name Arik Gilbert. He's now a member of the Savannah State football team, and his journey has been absolutely insane. Let's get into all of this as we continue with Locked On HBCU. I know people who turn their gaming consoles into a TV to watch streaming and all of the other good stuff. But what if you could turn your TV into a gaming console? It would be way better for travel, right? Well, now you can with your Fire TV Stick 4K. You may not want to lug that Xbox all the way to wherever you're going, but you really want to play the game. I think it's way easier. Tell me if I'm wrong. I think it's way easier to pack a Fire TV Stick and an Xbox controller. It's just that simple. If you do that and then you also use Xbox Game Pass on Ultimate with EA Play included, then you're ready to go. It's just that simple. So, like I said, it's more affordable. It's easier to travel with. I just think it's so convenient. And if you ever want to try out Xbox games without the big upfront investment, Fire TV Stick can be a low pressure way to start exploring some games. I don't know. You tell me how you feeling. But in order to do that, you got to go to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices like the Fire TV Stick 4K second gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max first and second gen, and Fire TV Cube third gen. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On NBA. The Timberwolves knocked out the Lakers, and meanwhile, the Rockets stayed alive against the Warriors. You can hear about those biggest stories and the upcoming games tonight or whenever you decide to check out Locked On NBA. Apologies for today's episode getting out late. We had some weather that actually knocked out the Wi-Fi, and it was out pretty much all night. So we had to come back and finish this episode in the morning. So I appreciate your patience. Thank you very much. And speaking of patience, that's Arik Gilbert's story. Like as far as fans of Arik Gilbert, I think that many of us remember him from his high school days. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year. He was on the magazine with Paige Beckers, and I'm not going to sit here and act like he was just second fiddle to Paige Beckers at that time. I wasn't paying attention to girls high school basketball. So Arik Gilbert was like, whoa to me. So when I seen this news, and it's funny how those two careers panned out. Paige Beckers is now, welcome to the city, #1 pick for the Dallas Wings. And Arik Gilbert is still trying to find his way. He's still trying to find a place that he can call home for multiple seasons and play multiple seasons. He's never done that. He's been to 3 schools and he's played a combined 2 seasons. I think that that's crazy to me. And I'm talking about 2 seasons at one school. He's played 2 seasons in his collegiate career. But when I seen the name Arik Gilbert, because I had seen it once and they just called him a tight end, and like I'll think it. I'll come back to that later. When I seen the name Arik Gilbert in another headline, I said, what? Click, 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 click. Why is this not loading fast enough? I was excited because Arik Gilbert is such a talented. Arik Gilbert was such a talented player. And I think that brings up the most interesting part about Arik Gilbert to Savannah State. Gilbert was a guy. Like Gilbert was supposed to be an elite first round tight end coming out of high school. That's what people expected of him. But that was so long ago. Gilbert hasn't played a full season, so to speak. He missed some games, but a season worth of games since 2020. He hasn't played at all since 2022. Was his high school description an accurate representation of what he'd be? Who knows at this point, and who really cares? The truth of the matter is that man hasn't played ball in over 3 years and hasn't played consistent ball in half a decade. What can I point to tell you what Savannah State is getting? I don't know. But I know I'm excited because I know what his ceiling was. I know what his peak was. I know what his talent level was coming out of high school. No one knows if high school players are going to translate to the collegiate ranks. No one knows if high school players are going to excuse me. No one knows if high school players are going to translate to the collegiate ranks. Typically, the benefit of the doubt is given after a couple of years. That was 5 years ago. Arik Gilbert probably isn't even who he was in 2022. It's difficult to know. But what I do know is I'm excited because I know the name and I know the talent and I know the expectations I once had for him. And to some degree, at least, to some degree, those expectations still come into play. Maybe it's because he's played 11 games over his career. It's very difficult to prove somebody wrong in 11 games. It just is. And he wasn't terrible. I think he was solid. He was cool. But freshman year at LSU, he ends up going for 38 catches, 35 catches, 368 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was his freshman year. And then he left LSU and he really hasn't played since. I remember when he left the Tigers, it was to go be closer to home. That's what was said. I think it was a lot of funniness around that situation, but that's what was said, is that he wanted to go to the University of Georgia to be closer to home. He did that. He didn't play in 21, though. And that's the thing. He played in 2020, LSU. Didn't play in 2021 at Georgia. He was there, but he didn't play. He played a couple of games in 2022. He transfers to Nebraska in 23, has some legal issues that seemingly went over into the beginning of 24. I don't know why he didn't play in 24, but he entered the portal in December of last year. So what you're looking at Arik Gilbert is play, skip, play, skip, skip. Since coming out of high school, it's very difficult for me to sit here and tell you what Savannah State is getting, other than a player that had an immense level of talent. And this is a great example of, if you're talented, you're going to get a lot of opportunities, and no one's going to complain about it. Me personally, at least, I'm not going to complain about it because I know that's how it goes. I look at a guy like, I want to say, gosh, I can't believe I'm getting this. I'm having a brain fart right now because the only name that comes to mind is Justin Blackman, and that's because he's been in some trouble lately. Josh Gordon. That's the name I'm thinking about. Josh Gordon got buku chances. Josh Gordon was suspended at the end of the season indefinitely and was back for the next season. It's crazy. It's crazy. But anyway, you get a lot of opportunities. And Arik Gilbert has been in college for a long time. Here we go. Gilbert has been in college long enough for us to stop looking at his high school description and high school scouting report as what he is or what he could be. But at the same time, he hasn't played enough games for us to form a real opinion on what he is outside of that. So I kind of have to lean on this high school from 2019. It was a decade ago. And I have to lean on that to a degree because he hasn't given me anything else to base my opinion on. He just simply hasn't played enough college games. And it's disappointing because of how long he's been out of high school, but he's had his own problems. And that's why I say patience is a big deal. Patience is a big deal when it comes to fans of Arik Gilbert because you're waiting for him to show you something. Now he's transferring to Savannah State, and I think that he's so talented, he would be on my short list of players. And this is really a long shot, so maybe it shouldn't be a short list, but he's on my list, my short list of players who could win Offensive Player of the Year. I think that he's that talented. I think we have to have conversations around him winning that. Now, do I think it's likely? Of course not. Of course not. He plays tight end. His position alone makes it a long shot that he'll actually be able to win this award. But I use this description not as hyperbole, not as just a made up claim in order to boost up his talent level. I use it to accurately describe how talented that Arik Gilbert is. Arik Gilbert was a player, like I said, coming out of high school. We expected to be like a Kyle Pitts, We expect it to be like a Brock Bowers. We expect, and I don't mean play style, but just maybe Kyle Pitts would have been more accurate. 'Cause I think he was more of an athletic receiving type of guy, but we expected him to be one of those. His first year at LSU, he was okay. 35, 368, 2 touchdowns. That's solid. It's not blowing you out the water or anything. I would like to see where Mason Taylor, the first round, or excuse me, the second round tight end out of LSU, ended up getting on his career, like what he averaged. But I think it was a little better than that. I'm not gonna look it up. I'm fighting the urge. If you go on video, you see me kind of tighten up like I was finna go. I am finna go. But let me see Mason Taylor career stats. And here's the thing: is that was just his freshman year. So Mason Taylor in his freshman year, 414, 3 touchdowns, 348, 1 touchdown, 546, 2 touchdowns. This was clearly his best year in 2024, both watching the games and looking at the stats. But it didn't feel like 2023 took a step back. It really didn't. But then again, when you play with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., and you got Kyron Lacey, rest in peace, you have all of these players. Yeah, you'll probably take a step back because Jaden Daniels is throwing to those guys a lot. So it does kind of make sense on why that step back would happen. But you look at it, he had a more prominent role in 24, 504. That is very realistic for Arik Gilbert at Savannah State. I think it would have been realistic for him at LSU, but this is a big time matchup. This is exciting, or excuse me, big time addition. This is exciting. This is what you get really interested to see these type of players come in because Gilbert's name. That's how I felt. But yeah, anyway, let's see. I hope that he can. I hope that everything he was going through is in his past. Some of those complications that he dealt with, some of those reasons he left schools, because it's not all just what he got into in Nebraska was legal. It wasn't necessarily the case at LSU, to my knowledge. It wasn't necessarily the case at Georgia, to my knowledge. But there was legal things reported at Nebraska. So hopefully he has all of those things that are behind him, both in his departures or in all three of his departures. But Savannah State, you could get him for a couple of years. He should still have 2 years of eligibility despite being in the league or being in college for a while already. So anyway, pushing forward, we're going to take a look at another FCS player another SIAC player that Chennis Berry has grabbed up and brought to the FCS level as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Have you ever looked at your bank account and said, where'd all my money go? You didn't pay attention for maybe a month or whatever, and now you're wondering where all of your funds going. Last time I was at this amount, now I'm here. This is insane to me. Where did all my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track, and it's easy right past you. It's easy for that. And with Monarch Money, that's where they come in and they provide you with a personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. And you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building your wealth. Matter of fact, let's ditch the 17 million apps that you've been using to track and just condense it into Monarch Money. Your phone space will thank you. You'll thank yourself. And it's also be way easier than having to swipe, 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 swipe. Take control of your finances today. Go to Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com using the code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Chennis Berry got himself another D2 star. This time it's Malik Harp, and it's right back. He's going right back to a familiar pool for him. He's going back to the SIAC. We all know Chennis Berry made the jump from Benedict College to South Carolina State last season, and it paid huge dividends for the Bulldogs. They were able to make it to the Celebration Bowl for the first time since in 3 years. I'm just going to say 3 years. I don't feel like doing the math. 2022? I think that's the year it was. Was it? No, it might have been 21. Let's see. You had 3 years. 3 years. Oh, the game's played in 24. So anyway, yeah, it says 2021. That's funny. But anyway, Malik Harp is making this move from Fort Valley State to South Carolina State, very similar to what Chennis Berry did just a year later. And also, obviously, he's a player. But why? He says, I chose South Carolina State because of their winning culture and family tradition. When I went on my visit, I felt nothing but genuine love and great energy. Playing under Chennis Berry and this staff gives me room to grow on and off the field. I believe the jump to FCS will impact my chances tremendously. Being able to get more exposure at this level is something I always wanted. Linebacker Aaron Smith just signed a free agent deal to the New York Jets, so it's a great opportunity. Harp is a linebacker. He wants to emulate the success of Aaron Smith and even pass it. So I think he should only have 1 year eligibility left. Those things are getting weirder and weirder by the day. It's hard for me to project. I thought that many people's eligibility was over. Guess not. So I think he should have a year left. It'll be difficult to surpass Aaron Smith because he had a multi-year production. But I think that he has talent and he can come out and make a name for himself in one season that allows him to get a similar UDFA rookie minicamp. It allows him to make the league if he has a big year. Now, it'll be difficult, but I do think it's doable. One thing he said that was interesting is the jump to the FCS impacting his chances. I've never heard that. We always talk about how limited the chances at the FCS level are, but for him to say, I'm jumping from D2 to FCS to improve my chances, yeah, I mean, I guess he's right. I do. I guess he's right. And never really thought about that. I do like to talk about FCS schools being the big dogs in the transfer portal, the big fish eating up some D2 players because I don't feel like that's talked about enough. So because I don't think that's talked about enough, I do like to make it my purpose to come out and say, hey, they are eating the smaller schools too. It's not just like the FCS at the bottom of the totem pole. So it was kind of interesting to hear that. I'll say that, to say the least. I should say. It's a lot of saying there. Let me move on. The point is, I think Barry had a great success rate last year, and you have to take that into account. You have to take into account that Barry, when you look at him, man, Barry had Caden High. He had Broughton. I'll be confusing some of the guys sometimes, but he had a boatload of Benedict College players who came with him to South Carolina State, and they ended up having a great time. And I think that the consistency in coaching, yes, did play a huge part in that. I don't want to deny that. But at the same time, it's player identification and it's player development. Those are two things that we don't talk about. If you're talking about going from the FCS level to the FBS level or from the D2 level to the FCS level, anytime that you're jumping up a subdivision, it's about player identification and development. That's really all recruiting is every time, to be honest. But I think it's a little bit easier when you're talking about being on a same subdivision. So because I feel like that's what it is, he's identified the talent before. He didn't just bring all of Benedict with him. He brought guys who all made impacts. I would say probably 80 to 90% of the players that came to Benedict College with Chennis Berry made an impact in some sort of way last year. That's just how it felt, at least. Maybe they had some big producers and other guys just were, less in the open, so they just were less seen. I don't know. But it feels like he knew which players to go grab. He knew which players could translate for him at the FCS level. And Malik Harp is a guy who he's identified. The development is to be to be determined, but it's all about winning games. It's all about winning games for Harp. It's all about winning games for Barry. And for Barry, he's thinking to himself like, yo, I got to replace Aaron Smith in some way. Let me go ahead and do it with somebody I'm familiar with. Because in the last year that Chennis Berry was at Benedict College and he was in the SIAC, excuse me, that was a monster year for Harp. Harp was a second team all SIAC player, and it was easily his best year. He didn't play much his freshman year. 6 games, though, should keep that as a year of eligibility. He spent 24. He wasn't that productive either, though he did play much more. But 23, that was the season. In 23, he had 13 and a half tackles for a loss. He had 70 tackles total, kind of an even split, solo and assisted, to be honest. And he had 1 sack. But then he had production through the air. So he had 2 interceptions. He had 6 pass deflections. That was the year where he really took off because you see impact plays, pass deflections, 6 of them, interceptions, 2 of them, tackles for a loss, 13 and a half of them. Like, when you're talking about 70 tackles, so a good amount of tackles, this is what you want. If you can get 2023 Malik Harp, yeah, South Carolina State is going to have themselves a pretty good linebacker in the middle of their defense. They are. You have to get that out of them, though. You have to get the guy who is productive in ball in pass coverage. Get the guy who is downhill making impact plays behind the line of scrimmage. That is what you are looking for, and I think that is what he can bring. So, anyway, tomorrow's episode, we're going to be looking towards the 2026 draft, just taking a little peek. I think this will probably be the end of our draft coverage unless some other big time story comes out. Rookie mini camps is until late, mid to late May. So we don't have much to talk about on that draft class until they start getting on the field. But I do want to take a peek over to guys like Eric Hunter and Eden James on tomorrow's episode. So in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.